Alrighty, now we're back trying to finish this table. I just want to remind everybody what we're doing here. What we're trying to talk about is, if those are your only choices are to reject or not reject, that doesn't mean that you're going to be right every time. Sometimes you'll be right and sometimes you'll be wrong. And this table kind of helps us elucidate that fact. And there's nothing special about the legal system. I could have done this with all sorts of things. The legal system is just kind of a classic example that gets used a lot. Okay, hold on one sec. Okay, had a little pagination issue there. All right. So when we go through the trial, then we're going to make some decisions. Now, you could not reject H naught. If you do not reject it, then you're living there, right? So then the verdict is not guilty, right? If you don't reject your innocence, if we don't reject your innocence, then we're giving you a not guilty verdict. And if we reject H naught, then we're going to give you a guilty verdict. Oops, hold on. Verdict is, if I could spell verdict right, verdict is guilty. Now, it's important to understand, we don't say that you're innocent. I mean, when we let you go, we're not saying, oh, this person was innocent. We're saying you're not guilty. It's sort of like saying, I think you're still guilty of something. I just didn't have evidence to prove it. And that's very much what I was talking about back here in a previous page. When you make these decisions, you're not accepting this person's innocence. You're just saying, I didn't have enough evidence to prove that you were the other thing, right? I assume you are innocent unless I can prove it otherwise. The burden of proof is on the person that's trying to convict you, not on you. You are assumed to be innocent unless I can prove it otherwise. That's why the null hypothesis is innocent in the US. In Britain, I believe it's the other way. But anyway. Okay, so let's suppose you did not commit the crime and you get a not guilty verdict. Well, that's a correct decision, right? You didn't do it and the jury lets you go. Cool. Now over here, you did commit the crime and you got a guilty verdict. Okay, well, that's also appropriate, right? So that leads us to the other two. What if you did not commit the crime but your verdict is guilty? Let's think about that. Did not commit the crime, but, oops, I'm sorry. I'm putting that in the wrong spot. This one. Oh, that's the one. Did not commit the crime, but convicted. Wrongly convicted. This is a type called a type 1 error, right? When they reject H naught, but H naught was true. You didn't do it, but they rejected that and said you did. Okay? These are all the people that show up on, Oprah Winfrey and talk shows, because it's heartbreaking because they didn't do it and they are stuck for years and years and years on death row or in prison with no chance of parole for something they never did. There's been a lot of exonerations. I mean, not lots. It's not like, thousands and thousands, but there's sufficient quantities. And if you're interested in about it, I always have this discussion about this type of error, especially on the discussion board and the online course. But if you're interested, you can look up something called the Innocence Project. And they also have a documentary that they helped produce called After Innocence. And it's amazing how people that have been wrongfully convicted and are finally let go, they're exonerated, but their records aren't expunged, so they still can't get jobs. They're still essentially being punished by society for something they never did. It's fascinating and it's heartbreaking, and it really makes you want to donate to the Innocence Project. So check out the Innocence Project or After Innocence, the movie that they made. It's really interesting. Now over here, you did commit the crime. This is the stuff of soap operas. You did commit the crime, but you were not convicted. Right? It's classic mobster stuff, It's the kind of thing, that in soap operas this happens all the time, usually for a good reason or something like that. So I'm making light of it. Of course, it's a very serious problem because you don't want people that are guilty of murder or whatever to be walking free. That's not necessarily a good thing for your society. Okay, so this is called a type 1 error down here. This is a type 2 error up here. And that's kind of how this table gets worn out. And it would do this for any kind of problem, not just the legal system.